let's start with Unit 4. We're looking at our question here. State if the three numbers can be the measures of the size of a triangle. Okay. By the way, today I'm going to be working questions 1 through 6. But let's take a look at something really quick. I want to show you guys something really quick. Size of a triangle. So let's talk about this rule. It's called triangle inequality, but who cares about the name? Let's just take a look at this. Let's say there's three sides. Let the side BC be bigger than the segment AB and the segment CD. So we're gonna have three sides, and BC is gonna be the biggest. Can you make a triangle? So let's talk about this rule. So let me show you. Okay, I have three sides, and BC is the biggest, right? We can see the measurements as measurements of AB, measurement CD, and the measurements of BC. I have all three. My question is, can you make them in a triangle? So let me put them together. I'm gonna put, in this case, I'm gonna put the biggest side at the bottom. So you guys see BC's at the bottom is the biggest. And for you guys to know that it actually relates to here to my measurements, look what happens if I make AB smaller. You see? It gets, the other side gets smaller or bigger depending on my changes. So I still have my measurements there. So I know when we do this, there happens to be three cases. We're going to be dealing with three cases. And one of the cases is the sum. If I add the sum of the two smaller measurements, the sum of the two smaller measurements can be either smaller than the big side, the sum of the two small measurements is equal to the big side, or the sum of the two small measurements is bigger than the big side. Those are my three cases. So that's actually what I'm going to compare, those three cases. So first, I want to see what happens if I add the two small sides and it happens to be less than the big side. So for that, let me actually do something really quick. Let me have this thing calculate this. So I'm adding the measurements there. So in here, I don't want to deal with the first case. I want to deal with the first case when the sum is still less than the big side. So let me make this side smaller. Let me go to what I need. Right? If I add the two small sides is 6.83, the big side is more than 6.83. So let me move my pieces here. Let me move my sides to see if it can actually create a triangle. No, I cannot. You guys see it doesn't close. They're not going to reach, right? So as long as adding the two small sides is less than the big side, I cannot because this side will never reach. So I'm going to say this side did not work. So again, if I add the two small sides and it's still less than the big side, it doesn't work. Okay? Well, what happens if they actually equal each other? I add the two small sides. So actually, let me make them equal each other. Let me bring this to about 9.18. Okay, there. So see how, let me highlight these. I'm adding the two small sides and it goes 9.18 centimeters. I just look at the big side, which is 9.18. What happens when they're equal to each other? Looking at my figure here, like, oh, it looks like it's a triangle. Some people might say right there. There's a triangle right there. Well, not quite. Not quite, because you guys see how my circles, my two dots, they don't really overlap. So I'm gonna say my two sides are really, really close to, but they're not exactly there. This case, we kind of see them touching because I have those dots, those red points, just so for me to be able to move my sides. They do touch, and I'm gonna say they do touch when they're like right here. These 2 points are going to overlap, and it's right there. So they do get to touch. However, I don't call that a triangle. I call that a line segment, right? We see a line segment, they actually overlap. The two small sides when it's equal to the big side, it is not a triangle either. So let's say I had as an example, the two small sides were 2 and 3, and the big side was 5. right? 2 plus 3 equals 5. I will say no, it's not a triangle. So let me answer this case. No, it is not a triangle. It doesn't work either. Now, my other case, looking at here, my cases here, it is what happens if the sum of the two small sides is more than the big side? Okay, so what do I mean with that? Let me open these right here. Let me make one of these sides bigger. So we still, if you compare my three sides, we still see that side BC is the biggest, right? That was an idea we had at the beginning. BC is still the biggest. However, when I add the two small numbers, 4.02 plus 6.64, it gives me 10.66. So when I add the two small measurements, it is more than the third side. Let me see if I can actually create a triangle here. Yeah, it will overlap about there. I'm a little bit off, so I cannot quite get it, but you guys can see it is going to meet about there. And that looks like a triangle to me. That looks like a triangle. So I will be able to create a triangle. The only time when it does work, the only time, let me emphasize that, the only time when it does work is when the sum, and when I mean with sum is adding, when I add the two smaller sides and it is greater than the third side. So again, when you add the two smaller sides, it has to be greater than the third side. So that one worked. Good. I know we use ChatGPT. I know some people here like using ChatGPT. So I went over to ChatGPT. I believe in ChatGPT as a help. Let's not have ChatGPT do our work. I can sometimes trick ChatGPT, and believe me, I will get you guys. And I will push it more on the test. Okay, so like I said, don't go for ChatGPT. But I went for ChatGPT for help, and I asked ChatGPT the triangle inequality theorem. So I typed in what is the triangle inequality theorem. ChatGPT said the triangle inequality theorem is a rule in geometry that describes a relationship between the lengths of the sides of a triangle. And it says the sums of the lengths of any two sides of a triangle must be greater than the length of the third side. And it says, let's say the sides are A, B, C. It says A plus B has to be bigger than C. A plus C has to be bigger than B, and B plus C has to be bigger than A. So it says for us to check three times that the sum of any two sides has to be bigger than the third side. Well, if I add the big side always, the big side plus any other side, it will obviously be bigger than the other one because the big side was biggest to begin with. So I'm like, ChatGPT, why are you checking this all the time? Why don't you just go over it and just check the two small sides? Add the two small sides and it has to be bigger than the third side. That's it. And it gives me an example. You have the size 3, 4, and 8. 3 plus 4, see how it's checking the two small sides? 3 plus 4 is 7, which is not more than 8. So no, it cannot be a triangle. So I'm like, okay, again, use ChatGPT for help, not to do your work. So let's take a look. I don't need ChatGPT for my homework here. So let's take a look at question number 1. State if the three numbers can be the measures of the size of a triangle. Okay, so I'm interested here on the big side. The numbers are not going to be given in any order, so don't think they're going to be from small to large. Sometimes they will, but not always. It's just three random numbers. So what I do is identify the big number. In my case, 9, right? 8, 6, and 9. The big side is 9. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add the other two sides. So 8 plus 6. And this has to be bigger. It cannot be equal to or less than. It has to be bigger than the third side, 9. So then I ask myself, is 8 plus 6 more than 9? I know 8 plus 6 is 14. So I'm really asking myself, is 14 more than 9? Well, yes. In this case, is yes. So that will be my answer. Yes. It stated that three numbers can be the measures of the size of a triangle. I can make a triangle with those three sides. Now let's take a look at question number 2. Can the sides of the triangle have lengths 4, 5, and 8? Okay, so I'm given three sides. Let me identify the big one. The big number here is 8. So I'm going to add the two smaller sides, 4 plus 5. And it has to be bigger than 8. I know 4 plus 5 is 9. So I'm asking myself here, is 9 more than 8? Well, yes. In this case, is yes as well. So I'm going to say yes. Some of your answers will be no's. Okay, now let's take a look at here. Two sides of the triangle have the following measures, 10 and 9. Find the range of possible measures for the third side. Oh, let me come back and let me show you guys again my file here. Remember the file that we just used here? Cool. I'm gonna do an example here. Let's say I had two sides. One of them, my side AB is 5 centimeters, and my side AC is 8 centimeters. So let's say I was given two sides, 5 and 8. Well, I can come out with a triangle, right? I can just close the third side, can come up with a triangle. I'm gonna have this program measure the third side. So right now it's 9.56. I can even check the previous rule, right? I add the two small numbers, 5 plus 8. It is more than 9.56. So yeah, it is a triangle. But the cool thing on here it is, well, I can make my third side bigger, right? If I put my corners close, I can make it small, like there's a forward. My third side is forward, or I can make it even 10.06. Now here it is. My question is, how big is the biggest and how small is the smallest side it can be? Right? I can go here, small, small, small. It goes down to, I see my number's 3.31. So it keeps on getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually gets to 3. Cool. But then that's not a segment. That's not a triangle. That's a segment. And it starts getting bigger and bigger. So I'm gonna say it was getting really close to 3. Really close. But once it reaches 3, is not a triangle anymore. So the third side, the smallest it can be is close to 3. So it has to be more than 3. Okay. Now, what's the biggest that it can reach? So I see there it's 11.78. I think I can go a little bit more. Still can get a little bit more. Keeps on growing and growing until I get to 13th. But then 13 is not a triangle anymore. It's a line segment. And then it keeps, when I bring it, it keeps on bringing down if I bring it to the other side. So I can see it reaches almost 13. So on the far down, it almost reaches 3. On the far up, it almost reaches 13. So I'm going to come out with my statement here. X, I'm going to call the third side X because I don't know it. I'm going to say it is between 3 and 13. It has to be more than 3, but it has to be less than 13. And we saw it here in our case. Some of you might be like, yeah, I can see it, but what about when I do my homework? What's going to happen when I do my homework? I don't have this sketch pad with me, so how am I going to check the sites? Well, let's think. My numbers were 5 and 8, and my values here were 3 and 13. What can you do to your 8 and 5 to come up with 3? Think of operations like add, subtract, multiply, divide. What can you do to an 8 and a 5 to come out with a 3? And then once we figure that out, is what can we do with 8 and 5 to come out with 13? I know some of you guys saw it right away. When you subtract the values, 8 minus 5, you get 3. When you add the values, 8 plus 5, you get 13. So that's how we're going to do it when we do our homework. We're going to subtract the values to come up with the smaller value, and we're going to add the values to come up with the big side. Now, one thing, very, very important thing. Measurements, the side of a triangle, it's a positive value. So be careful when you subtract. It does matter whether you go 8 minus 5 or you go 5 minus 8. It does matter. The order matters. If we go 5 minus 8, I get negative 3. If I go 8 minus 5, I get positive 3. The sides cannot be negative, so make sure on your subtraction, you start with the big number. So 8 is bigger, so start with 8. 8 minus 5. Don't go 5 minus 8. Don't go 5 minus 8 because that will give you a negative value. So be careful when we subtract. So having that said, let's take a look at our homework here or our notes here. Two sides of the triangle have the following measures, 10 and 9. And as a matter of fact, if this was my homework, I will see on my homework that I have the x, which is the third value, and it says here in between two values. And then I have to fill in on the two values. Well, what happens when you subtract 10 minus 9? So I'm going to put a minus sign. What happens when you subtract 10 minus 9? Well, I get a 1, right? 10 minus 9, my answer is 1. So that's going to be my first answer, 1. Now, what happens when you add? So my value, I'm thinking 10 plus 9, 19. And that's going to be my other value. So my x is in between 1 and 19. Do notice my inequality here. I'm going to highlight it a lot. Notice how I'm saying here x, 1 is less than x. So obviously I'm going to start with the smaller value. And then here at the end, I see x is less than 19. I'm going to finish with the big value. So be careful on the order you type your numbers in. Okay, let's take a look at another example. Number 4. To begin with, on my notes, on my homework, I'm going to be given this, going to be an x and two inequality signs. And then I have to fill in two spaces here. And I'm given the values 7 and 10. For the first value, subtract your values. So 10 minus 7. 10 minus 7 is 3. So my value has to be 3. What if you add 10 plus 7? Well, 10 plus 7 is 17. So my value is 17. So if I'm given two sides, 7 and 10, to make a triangle, my third side has to be between 3 and 17. So it has to be more than 3, has to be less than 17. Having that said, let's take a look at the next example here. Now we're throwing in some words. Bob is creating a triangle by connecting 3 wooden rods. If the lengths of the first 2 wooden rods are 30 inches and 19 inches, what is the range of possible lengths of a third wooden rod that will create a triangle? Okay, so I know I was looking at ranges earlier, questions 3 and 4 from our notes. I had something like this. My two sides given are 30 and 19. I know when I subtract these two values, 30 minus 19, I get 11. So my small value is 11. I know when I add these values, 30 plus 19, I get 49. So having that said, I should be able to answer the following. My value is less than what? Well, it's right here. It has to be less than 49. So that's what I answer, less than 49. More than what? Well, X is more than 11, right? So that's what I'm asking. I'm asking you guys to type in the same idea, just to type it in there for us to understand it a little bit more. It has to be less than 49. It has to be more than 11. Hmm, interesting. So having that said, I'm gonna go here. Two sides of a triangle have the following measures. Find a possible value for the third side. I can come up with a range, all right? That's what we're doing on questions 3 and 4 from our notes. I can come up with my range. My x is in between two values. In this case, it's in between 2 and 18. How did I come up with those two values? I subtracted 10 minus 8. That's how I came up with the 2. I added 10 plus 8. That's how I came up with the 18. So I can come up with my range, and that says any values between 2 and 18. Well, here, I'm not asking for the range. Here it is asking find a possible value. And I see my answer, I just should be able to type something in there. Just one thing in there, one number. Okay. I just said my range has to be between 2 and 18. So think of a number between 2 and 18? Remember, it has to be more than 2. It has to be less than 18. I'm thinking the number 10. Is 10 more than 2 but less than 18? Yes. And yes, that will be correct. Here, I'm not asking you for the only value. When we say the range, we said any value between 2 and 18 will work. Right here, what I'm asking is just give me a number for us to understand them even more. So I just want to ask you, give me a possible value for the third side. I said 10. Some of you might say, well, what about 15? Because 15 is more than 2, less than 18. Type 15 and you will see that it will work. How about 9? Yeah, well, 9 is in between 2 and 18. Type in 9 and that will work. Somebody might say, well, how about 25? Okay, well, 25 is not less than 18. It has to be more than 2 and less than 18. 25 will not work. Type 25 and you will see that it does not work. I'm just asking, give me a value. Find your range. I found my range to be between 2 and 18. Find a range and then choose a number from that range.